introduce our clinical trials showcase. I'm Dr. Leora Fox. I'm the Assistant Director of Research and Patient Engagement at HDSA. I oversee our research programs, and as you've been hearing all this convention, HDSA funds research, we communicate about research and provide resources for participating in research, and we seek to make your voices heard by those doing HD research. And because you're in this room right now, I know that you're eager to continue hearing about the progress being made in research and how you can participate and what's coming next. So you're going to hear shortly about HDSA's resource, HD Trial Finder, a little bit more from my colleague Kelly. And then you'll hear directly from representatives of 3 companies that have ongoing clinical trials right now. But while everybody is kind of settling in and eating, I wanted to take a few minutes today to tell you what it means to me as a scientist and to all the people working towards therapies for HD that there's such a huge family audience here at convention and here in this room to engage directly with research. There's probably a lot of us here who have heard a researcher or a doctor talk about how Huntington's disease is really fascinating. Certainly nobody wants to hear that their illness is fascinating. But for many scientists and doctors, that is where our passion is born. So we begin working on HD because the genetics and the symptoms are intriguing. But we keep working on HD because of you. We meet you, and we are moved by you, and we're welcomed by you. And we're led to commit our careers to this challenge that you're facing every day. We're really drawn to your stories and your resilience and your persistence despite everything that HD has thrown at you and at generations of your family, perhaps. So I did my PhD studying Huntington's disease. I've been at HDSA for 6 years now, and sometimes people ask me how I got into this, whether I have a personal connection or a family connection. And I didn't, but I do now. I do here. And that's because of you. And I can promise you that there are a lot of smart minds who feel that way, and that at the heart of big pharma and at the benches in labs are compassionate, tremendously nerdy people who want to do right by this community. And researchers and clinicians need you to succeed at helping you. They need an understanding of what's important to you. They need help letting go of all the jargon. They need help opening the windows of their ivory towers and getting government officials to listen. They need funding, they need motivation, and ultimately they need participants in observational trials, in drug trials, in everything that you're hearing about at convention. I've had the privilege of, in my role as a scientist at HDSA, to work with a lot of researchers and company representatives and to bring to them what I hear from you as community members engaged with research. So your concerns and your thoughts and your questions and your triumphs and your challenges and your pain, you're helping us to make that the backdrop for the conversations that people are having at companies and in government offices and in labs about what comes next for HD science. And really the message that I want to give to you today is that when you have those conversations with us and with them at this event, in that exhibit hall, at events back in your local communities, that's advocacy. When you keep coming back to listen, to engage with the news, to engage with each other, even through a pandemic, even through years of tough news, that's advocacy. When you sit here today and you challenge yourself to learn something new, or hear something difficult, or look at something hopeful, when you go and tell your cousin about it, or your coworker, or your friend, or your spouse, that's advocacy. Scientists are trained to think about science in numbers and facts and data. My grad school advisor used to tell me that there was no crying in science. This community knows that there's some crying in science. I want to tell you that there's also laughing and hugging and jumping up and down and high fives and I believe that that's coming for this community too. And I hope that the HD Buzz team helps you to see that there's progress being made, there can be fun and humor in science, and that there are dozens of companies pushing forward with therapies for HD. But I also want you to know that however it makes you feel to learn about HD science in this room, at convention, all year round, whether that's excited and hopeful or angry and frustrated, that's okay, and you're not alone. So I hope that you keep feeling those things and talking about them with us amongst yourselves. Maybe what you hear at convention will lead you to consider participating in research in any way that you're capable of. But please know that being present here and engaging with research makes you an advocate. And for that, every HD scientist is going to keep giving you our gratitude until we can give you a cure. So thank you. I am now very pleased to introduce my colleague, Kelly Andrew. Kelly earned her BS in chemistry from Wake Forest University in 2019, where she conducted independent research on kombucha fermentation. She spent a year working in nonprofit environmental policy and advocacy and joined HDSA in 2021 as coordinator of research and mission programs. So she's going to talk about HD Trial Finder in a bit more detail so you can learn more about and participate in clinical trials. Here's Kelly.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here with you all today, and I'm excited to talk to you about HD Trial Finder. As a reminder, this presentation and everything you hear today is strictly for informational purposes. And I'm sure you guys are familiar with this slide at this point, but we want to hear from you, so if you can scan this QR code now or later today, they're posted all over convention. We would love to hear your feedback. How many of you have used HD Trial Finder before? Can I see some hands? Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your interest and participation in HD research. How many of you have never heard of Trial Finder before today? All right. Well, welcome. You're in the right place. And we're going to start you off with the basics. HD Trial Finder is an online clinical trials matching platform. So HD research is a very personal decision whether to participate, how to participate, and HD Trial Finder is meant to clear up some of the noise in making those decisions. So this is a tool for people with Huntington's disease, care partners of people with Huntington's disease, healthy volunteers, and physicians to learn about ongoing HD research studies and how to get involved in them. So this database is for studies based in the United States and Canada, and it does include a free call center staffed by trained HD clinical trial navigators to help you walk through this process. There are 4 easy steps to use HD Trial Finder, and I'm going to walk you through them right now. The first, you log in or create an account on the website. So first you go to hdtrialfinder.org and click Create an Account. This part's pretty easy. It's just your name, a password, best email address, but I do want to direct your attention to this bottom part of this page. So here you can opt into communications from study sponsors. So this does not mean you're going to get a weekly newsletter from a study sponsor popping into your email inbox. This means that HDSA works very closely with a third-party vendor called CareBox to manage HD Trial Finder. And study sponsors who have their studies listed on HD Trial Finder can choose to opt into communicating with participants. So this means that people in HD Trial Finder who have a profile that matches their study criteria could receive an email from them about the study if they choose to send one. So your information will not be shared directly with the study sponsor. HDSA does not have your information. All of that passes through CareBox. If you already have an HD Trial Finder account and you are not sure if you've opted into those communications or you want to change your preferences at any time, it's super easy. Once you log into the system, you just click on your own name, go to your account settings, and you can change those preferences at any time. All right, step 2, creating a profile. This part's pretty simple. You list what type of participant you are, whether you're creating a profile for yourself or on behalf of someone else, or whether you're just interested in learning about studies on Trial Finder. And as a reminder, you can stop and request a contact at any time. That free call center I mentioned is available at any time to you, so you can request a contact or call to talk to someone right away. All right, step 3, there are 11 very simple questions that you'll walk through to create your profile in HD Trial Finder. As a reminder, all this information will be completely confidential. Study sponsors will not have access to it. HDSA will not have access to it. This just helps CareBox identify which studies you might be eligible for. So there's 11 very simple questions. These will include things like where you receive care, family medical history, any medications you might be taking, the level of assistance you might need to be able to participate in a study. And again, all of that is completely anonymous. And last, you get to review your results. So a reminder again, you can request a contact at any time or call a clinical trial navigator to speak with someone directly. And then you can click through your studies. You can filter studies that appear to you by location, depending on how far you're willing to travel to participate in research. And your studies will be broken down into 4 main categories. So there are 4 types of studies listed on HD Trial Finder. The first are clinical studies. These are the big drug trials that you probably think about most frequently when you think of HD research. These are the national or global clinical trials of drugs. But there are so many other ways to get involved in in HD research. There's also registries. So these are things like Enroll HD, Change HD, Prevent HD. All are very important ways that you can contribute to our understanding of Huntington's disease. We also have biomarker and imaging studies available on HD Trial Finder. So these measure how specific measurements of Huntington's disease change over time. So these will use tools like brain imaging, blood tests, and other things to learn how specific disease metrics will change over time. And last, we have quality of life studies listed on HD Trial Finder. So these seek to understand how the day-to-day experiences of people with Huntington's disease might be able to be improved with lifestyle interventions. So these could include things like physical therapy studies, as well as even online surveys that you can complete from home about your experience with Huntington's disease. HDSA communicates directly with researchers to make sure that HD Trial Finder is super up to date. So you're getting very recent information when you use HD Trial Finder. All the studies listed on there are actively recruiting participants. HDSA communicates with researchers to make sure that study descriptions also best meet the needs of prospective participants, so everything is communicated in lay-friendly language. And listings come from publicly available resources. So these are things like clinicaltrials.gov, but HDSA is also directly in touch with student and faculty researchers who have applied to list their studies on HD Trial Finder, as well as research studies that might be funded through one of HDSA's research grants programs. Any contribution you make to HD research is super valuable and super important, whether that is participating in a clinical drug study or showing up to your annual enroll visit. Here it is one more time, your HD Trial Finder URL, www.hdtrialfinder.org. Thank you for your time and attention. And Leora, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Kelly. So I hope people will check out HD Trial Finder or revisit the site. So like Trial Finder, this session is meant to showcase ongoing trials. We have 3 presenters today from 3 companies that are running clinical trials right now. From Roche Genentech, we have Rita Gandhi. From Sage, we have Emily Leffler. And from Unicure, Dan Leonard. I will leave it to them to tell you directly about their 3 different approaches to treating HD and their ongoing studies. So first up, we have Dr. Rita Gandhi, who is a movement disorders neurologist and comes with 5 years of experience at Roche Genentech. Rita was in the U.S. Medical Affairs Group leading the study review team for a planned tominersen study in late-onset Huntington's disease. And after she got her medical degree, she did additional training and residencies in physical medicine and rehab, as well as in neurology with a specialty in movement disorders. Then she served as the director of the movement disorder program at Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia, where she developed a comprehensive program including different treatments and comprehensive inpatient and outpatient care for Parkinson's and HD patients. Let's welcome Dr. Rita Gandhi.
I just want to thank Leora and HDSA for having us here today to be able to provide this information to everyone. Here it is. I'm thrilled and humbled to be with you today to share an important update pertaining to our tominersen program. So as Leora mentioned, my name is Rita Gandhi. I am a movement disorders neurologist, and I've taken care of both Parkinson's disease and Huntington's disease patients. And as she's mentioned, I've been with Genentech now for 5 years. The information I'm presenting is for this community, and I want to acknowledge with gratitude all the people who have and who will continue to enroll in our study program. Just a quick disclaimer. As I mentioned, I'm a Genentech Roche employee, and tominersen is not an FDA-approved medication, so none of the information that I'm going to be providing should be construed as a recommendation for its use. Genentech is part of the Roche Group, and our mission is to pursue groundbreaking science in order to discover and develop medicines for people with serious and life-threatening diseases. For decades, we've been conducting neuroscience research and clinical trials aimed at exploring areas of the highest medical need. This is all done through partnering. We partner widely across several areas. This includes advocacy, academia, industry, and broader healthcare community. And our goal is to continue to push boundaries of scientific understanding to achieve clinical advancements for our patients. So with this in mind, I'd like to outline today's presentation. So we'll be covering the history of the tominersen program. I'd also like to talk about Generation HD2 study design and current status. And then I'd also like to give you some information about our clinical trial and our site overview. Just as a reminder, tominersen is an investigational molecule. It's what we call an antisense oligonucleotide, and it's designed to target the underlying genetic cause of HD. It's directly delivered to the central nervous system via an intrathecal injection called a lumbar puncture. I'm sure you guys heard a lot of that during the HD buzz. We have a long experimental and strong commitment to Huntington's disease going back a decade. And this all began as a partnership with Ionis in 2013 as tominersen was first developed. And this led to our phase 1/2 study. And in 2015 to 2017 is when we developed our Generation HD1 phase 3 trial. As many of you know, Generation HD1 unfortunately did not meet its main objective. And in 2021, dosing of tominersen was stopped after the overall benefits and risks were evaluated. Since that time, exploratory analysis available to Roche suggests that lower exposure to tominersen may benefit a younger adult patients with earlier stages of Huntington's disease. Therefore, the new Generation HD2 phase 2 study aims to assess lower doses of tominersen in an earlier HD population. Now that we've looked at the program history, I'd like to discuss some key changes in Generation HD2 compared to Generation HD1. So in terms of the study population and key inclusion criteria, in Generation HD1, we looked at what's called the manifest HD population. So these are individuals that were a little bit more advanced in their disease. In that study, we looked at patients between the ages of 25 and 65 years old with what we call a CAP score greater than 400. But in Generation HD2, we're now looking at prodromal and early manifest patients, again, patients that are less severe. And our age range is between 25 and 50 years old with a CAP score between 400 and 500. Now, the CAP score is also known as the Age CAG-related product. And it's a measure used by clinicians and scientists which takes into account a person's age and CAG repeat number. It's a way to estimate a person's lifetime exposure to the harmful effects of the HD gene. I also want to talk a little bit about the appreciation we have for those who are in the Gen HD1 trial. We received questions on whether those individuals would be able to participate in Gen HD2. So some of the HD1 participants who are in the placebo or no drug group may be eligible to enroll in Gen HD2. However, after consulting with HD experts and community leaders, we realize including previously treated participants may impact the ability to interpret clinical trial results and prevent an accurate evaluation of tominersen for HD. We recognize this may be a disappointment for individuals and families, and as we learn more about tominersen through GenHD2, we'll be able to evaluate if additional clinical trials will be available. I'd like to now go over the study design. So Generation HD2 is a placebo-controlled dose-finding study evaluating safety, biomarkers, and efficacy. We'll be evaluating 2 doses, a 60 milligram and 100 milligram dose every 16 weeks in the prodromal and early manifest HD patients. I want to talk a little bit about the prodromal group. So the way we define this group are those individuals that have motor, mentation, and memory problems, but are completely independent in their functional status. Whereas early manifest patients are, again, those individuals that also have motor, memory, and behavioral issues, but have some decline in their function. The study will include a 4-week screening period, and participants will be randomly chosen to be in one of 3 groups, either the placebo, the 60 milligram, or the 100 milligram group. The study will take 16 months and has what's called a common close design, which means that participants will remain in the study until the last participant's last visit. Once the study is completed and the data is reviewed, there is a possibility of an open label extension where all participants will receive the drug. I'm pleased to say that we have opened up the study in the US and Europe. And in the US, we have planned to have 17 sites activated across the US. You can see here 10 of the sites currently that are open and ready for enrollment, and those include Beth Israel in Boston, the Dent Neurological Institute in Amherst, Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, Northwestern in Chicago, Vanderbilt in Nashville, Tennessee, UAB in Birmingham, University of Florida in Gainesville, the Sen Excel Rocky Mountain in Inglewood, and then in Inland Northwest Research in Spokane. If anyone is interested in participating in this study, please speak with your healthcare provider or National Patient Association. So in summary, GenHD2 is a new dose-finding study testing 60 and 100 milligram intrathecal injection every 4 months. Every participant will receive tominersen for at least 16 months and will continue until the last participant has completed the study. A total of 360 participants with prodromal or early manifest patients are eligible, aged between 25 and 50, with what I said was a CAP score between 400 and 500. And GenHD2 is a global study, and it's expected to run in 15 countries. So interested individuals should speak to their HD specialist. I also want to say that we do have a medical booth outside, and so please, if you have any questions, please stop by for more information. Partnership is extremely important to Genentech and Roche, and with this, I just wanted to give a big thank you to the study participants, families, investigators, clinical study sites, and the entire HD community who make this research possible. Thank you. And I'm open for any questions that you might have.
You take that front quadrant, I'll take that.
Hello, thank you for your research. I was in the one that did not go through Roche. Will that preclude me by asking my doctor to be in the new one?
So I just want to make sure, so you were in the previous study, is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, and you would like to see if you could be in the other study. Unfortunately, we're not allowing individuals that were in GenHD1 to be in GenHD2 because we want to make sure that we have data that would be potentially unbiased. But thank you for being in GenHD1.
Okay, back here.
Yes, on your study, do you take into account somatic instability in individuals during the trial if their numbers go way up? And does that disqualify them from further, for being in the study?
It's a great question. So in our study, individuals have to be between a CAP score between 400 and 500. And so the way the CAP score is calculated, it takes into account the CAG number in addition to their age and then another variable. So depending on what that CAG repeat number is, that will determine whether you can be in the study. So we don't specifically have anything on somatic instability at this time.
Could you elaborate on the Croatia conference, what they found? And just, I didn't understand in the earlier meeting. Can you elaborate on the discoveries?
Okay, I'm sorry, on the which meeting?
There was a meeting in Croatia recently.
Yes.
And yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so I think that they talked about an HD buzz, right? Yeah, so what Dr. Udwile and Dr. Carroll had mentioned was that in Croatia, they had showed some data showing that there was a decrease in what we call NFL levels. So NFL is neurofilament light chain. Now, neurofilament light chain is often something that you see as neurons get damaged or get hurt over time. And so what they showed at that conference was that during the use of tominersen, there was a decline in that lower group, or that lower dose group. And that, yeah, and that was good. That was good. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And again, like I said, we really appreciate all the effort and hard work that the community has done. And so we have a booth outside, so please feel free to come.
Thanks so much, Dr. Gandhi. Next, we have Emily Leffler, who holds a doctorate and BCPP in pharmacy and is a director in clinical development at Sage Therapeutics. Dr. Leffler received her PharmD degree from the University of Colorado, followed by postgraduate training in neuropsychiatric pharmacy at the University of Texas Health Science Center in San Antonio. She spent the last 13 years working in the pharmaceutical industry after practicing for many years as a clinical pharmacist. And Dr. Leffler is passionate about clinical research and developing new therapies that can change people's lives. In her current role, she focuses on the clinical development program of Sage 718 in Huntington's disease. Please welcome Emily Leffler.
Hello, everybody. I am thrilled to be here again this year. For those of you that were here last year, you saw me present then, and I do have some updated information that I'll be sharing today. Let me make sure I know how to use this. Okay, so I will be presenting an overview and update of our clinical development program. We are focused on cognitive impairment that occurs in Huntington's disease. Here are my disclaimers. So Sage 718 is under investigation. It is not approved by any regulatory authorities. And while we hope for the best with the regulatory authorities, there is no guarantee that the studies I'll be talking about today will lead to approval. I wanted to start briefly by introducing you to Sage. So we are a unique company because we focus entirely on brain health. So we really focus where there's a high unmet need, and that needs to be disorders that affect the brain. We've grown rapidly in the past couple years, so now we have over 700 employees. And we're based in the Boston area, so in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Our science is entirely focused on two central nervous system receptors, those being the NMDA receptor and then the GABA receptor. And both of these systems play a very important role in communication within the brain and between neurons. Now, before I jump into the studies, I do want to talk a bit about what we expect to see or what we do see in Huntington's disease cognitive impairment, and where we hope we can make a difference. Now, cognition in a broad sense is the sum of all of our mental abilities. So that's somewhat of an abstract definition. It can be broken down into 6 different parts that you can see on this slide. So, okay, here's my pointer. So the first one is complex attention. So this is the ability to focus on a task at hand and to stay focused on that and not get distracted by things around you. Very important in a work setting, for instance. Next is learning and memory, if we're going over here on the right. So learning and memory is being able to read something or learn something and take it in, file it in your brain, and be able to retrieve it and use that knowledge at a later time. Next is language. That's pretty self-explanatory. Next, we have perceptual and motor function, also self-explanatory. And then social cognition, how you interact with others, maybe how you read emotion on other people's faces. And then probably most importantly here is executive function. So executive function is really what we rely on to get us through day-to-day responding to challenges that we face that come at us. It's what controls our ability to plan, to solve problems, to multitask, and to ultimately make decisions. This is very important in order to stay employed, for instance. It is also where we see initial changes in Huntington's disease. And it's specifically executive function that we are hoping to improve with this molecule. Now, cognition overall, just a brief education here, consists somewhat on a spectrum. So it starts with normal aging over on the left, and then on the far opposite end would be dementia. Now, unfortunately, all of our cognitive function will decline as we age. It's part of the normal aging process. I think other individuals have spoke to this during this meeting already. And so everyone's going to have some difficulties with memory sometimes, or multitasking. I think everyone's probably noticed as you get older that gets a little more challenging as well. But in neurodegenerative disorders specifically, this cognitive function, or what's becoming a dysfunction, can move along more rapidly and cause a greater decline in function. When we get to the middle there, where it's called cognitive impairment, you might have also heard this referred to as mild cognitive impairment. This is when cognitive changes become a concern in your day-to-day function, but you're still able to really get by independently. So perhaps you're at work and a task that used to take you 1 hour will take 2 hours. Or maybe you've noticed that you're forgetting where you put things at home more, or you're not quite as responsive when you're driving. So you're still able to do things, it's just becoming a bit harder, and the individuals who are experiencing it is noticing it. Now, as this continues to progress, which will happen in some people, does not mean it will happen to everybody, but this is when we start talking about the word dementia, and that can progress from mild to moderate to severe. And you hear dementia referred to oftentimes as Alzheimer's disease as well. And at this point, this is really when function is impaired and when you really need help from an individual for your day-to-day function, for your day-to-day activities, and you'll probably need to rely on a caregiver at some point. So it's important to keep in mind that cognitive changes can be very subtle initially, and it might just show up as difficulty performing tasks. When this happens, you can also see changes in mood in someone. That's one way you can notice it. Maybe someone withdraws from social interaction, and ultimately leads to difficulty with employment, loss of independence, and also a reliance on a care partner. So it is right here in this middle, it's in this middle section right here where we've designed our studies to focus. So when someone is still able to work and function relatively independently, but this is where we hope to make a difference. As you know, there are no approved therapies for the treatment of cognitive dysfunction in Huntington's disease. And so we're kind of taking on something that, we really hope and believe in that will work. And we hope to offer this to patients as a symptomatic treatment initially. So let me introduce the drug, and I'll try to do this simply. But so SAGE-718 is an oral molecule, and it focuses on NMDA receptors. So NMDA receptors are found throughout the central nervous system, and they're key to communication between neurons, and specifically to mediating learning and memory. Well, so why HD and why NMDA receptors? So in all of our brains, there's a molecule called 24S-hydroxycholesterol. You don't need to remember that, but 24S is what I'll call it. And this molecule normally functions and hits this receptor and allows it to function better. In Huntington's disease, it's been found that this molecule, 24S, is low, and those lowered levels have been associated with cognitive impairment. So we hope that SAGE-718 will replace the function of 24S that is lowered and help that NMDA receptor work better, thereby improving cognitive function. Hope that kind of makes sense. That takes me to our clinical trial program. So we call it Perspective. It's comprised of 3 clinical studies. 2 clinical studies are in the phase 2, and 1 is the phase 3 study at this point. That's the open label study. Individuals who complete the Dimension and Surveyor studies will be able to roll into the open label extension. And we will actually be enrolling a new cohort called the de novo cohort directly into the open label study a little bit down the road, probably towards the end of this year. So the Dimension study is actively enrolling. This is our phase 2 double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized study. It is designed to evaluate the effect of cognitive performance as well as functioning and quality of life. Being phase 2, we'll also be learning a lot more about the safety and tolerability of the molecule, as well as how the molecule works through the body, also referred to as pharmacokinetics. We will be enrolling a total of 178 participants. Some of the key inclusion criteria are listed here. Age 25 to 65, a CAG repeat length of greater than or equal to 36, no features of juvenile HD, and then there are some cognitive and functional measures that we will be using. So one that you're all familiar with TFC, so individuals need to have a TFC between 7 and 12. Participants will be randomized in a 1-to-1 fashion, so it randomly assigned to either SAGE-718 or placebo. It's just taken once a day in the morning. And this study is relatively short in duration. It's only 4 months total and 9 clinic visits. At the visits, you will have blood work done, but most of it is assessments done on like an iPad or a tablet. So cognitive assessments and functional assessments as well. And as I said, anyone who completes the study can go ahead and roll over to the open label study purview. Here are the sites in North America. So we will be conducting this, or we are, at 50 sites in the US, Canada, UK, and Australia. All the orange sites on here are actively enrolling. The blue sites should be enrolling within the next month or 2 because this recruitment is moving along quite rapidly. And if you want any other information about this, we do have a booth outside too, so feel free to come by and we can give you specifics. The other phase 2 study is the Surveyor study. This is also enrolling. This is a smaller study, and we are really looking at functional outcomes in the study. So this is important to us because if you perform, let's say, 3 points better on a cognitive assessment, we really want to know what that means functionally. What does that 3-point change look like in how you are able to go about your day-to-day activities? So in order to do this, the study does have a kind of a cool component because we have a virtual reality component that's on an iPad, and we also have a driving simulator. So those are cool aspects of this study. The inclusion criteria are exactly the same as the previous study, and we have a healthy cohort in this study as well. So we will be enrolling 40 HD patients and 40 healthy controls. The HD participants will be randomized to either placebo or SAGE 718. The healthy population will receive no treatment with anything, but they will do the same assessments as the Huntington's disease population. This is a shorter study, a little more intense, so 2 months, 6 visits total in the clinic. And once you're done with the study, you can roll into the open label where everyone will receive drug. Here are the study sites, so it's smaller, many of the same sites. Again, Orange is actively enrolling. I do want to mention, if you don't see a site near where you're located, we may have funds available to help you get to that site. So don't let study location prohibit you from looking into this study. Okay, and the last study I'm going to talk about is the Purview study. So this is the first time this audience has seen this information. So this is considered the open label extension study of the previous 2 studies. And as an open label extension does, we are really looking for long-term safety and tolerability. We want to make sure that if someone is using this drug for an extended duration, that the body is responding normally and it's still being felt to be effective as well. So 300 participants total. We expect about 150 of those to come from the other studies, and then we will allow about 150 participants straight into this open label study. The criteria for this group is a bit different. So the age is the same, 25 to 65. We do have a CAG expansion of greater than or 40 for this study, a CAP score of greater than or equal to 90. And then this group will not have as severe or noticeable cognitive decline. So it's much more of a higher functioning, I guess, population, if we could say that. But that would be assessed by your physician on whether you meet those criteria. Rita did talk quite a bit about the CAP score. I just want to let you know we use a different calculation than Roche does, so come and ask us and we can explain it a little bit. This study will go for a year in duration. Initially, our hope is to continue this study potentially until market approval, assuming the safety and efficacy continue to support the development. And right now, this map isn't entirely filled out because we are actively starting sites up. You can expect that any site that participates in Dimension or Surveyor will also have this study open at their site as well. And lastly, if you'd like to learn more, you can go to our internal clinical study site. So that's focusoNHD.com. Also, clinicaltrials.gov is available. You can email us directly, and that email address is on clinicaltrials.gov. And of course, probably the best resource here is HDSA Clinical Trial Finder, which we work closely with them to keep that updated. And there is also something on here, Picnic Health. Picnic Health will also have a booth outside. This is a patient registry that we're working with as well, and you can contribute your data to them. And that's all I have for you. I do want to take a moment to thank you all for letting us be here at HDSA. I do want to acknowledge all the patients who are already participating in our studies. We couldn't do it without you. Are there any questions at this time? I think I went a little over, so.
You know, one of the things I didn't catch was that are you targeting some aspect of the disease that's unique to Huntington disease, or if this is successful, would it have applicability to other situations where people have a mental decline?
Absolutely. So Huntington's disease is our lead program. Huntington's was found, the reason it's our lead program is because of that association with 24S-hydroxycholesterol. That seems to be very consistent in Huntington's disease. That signal or that biomarker per se is not found in Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. That being said, everyone has an NMDA receptor, and so we are looking and investigating this molecule in PD and AD as well. So yes, there is a potential to expand this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Leffler. Let's give her another hand. Our final speaker for this session is Daniel Leonard, who's the Senior Director of Global Patient Advocacy at Unicure. Dan works closely with HD patient organizations like HDSA to help educate the community on gene therapy and Unicure's program. He serves as an ambassador to the patient community and works to ensure that everyone at Unicure understands the unique challenges and needs of the HD community. Dan has spent over 23 years working in the biotech industry and is now a frequent speaker at conferences on the topic of patient advocacy with a focus on the gene therapy space. Outside of work, Dan likes to spend time with his wife, their 2 daughters, and their pesky rescue mutt named Blue. He is a published short story writer and is an avid triathlete. Please welcome Dan Leonard.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Leora said, I'm Dan Leonard, the Senior Director of Global Patient Advocacy at Unicure. It is truly an honor and a pleasure to be here today to tell you a little bit more about the company that I work for and about our gene therapy clinical development program in Huntington's disease. Before I get started, here are some disclosures. I want to key in on 2 that are very important. Firstly, the clinical program that I am going to discuss today is for an investigational product that has not been approved by the FDA or any other health authority in any other country. Second, the most important source of information about clinical trials is your healthcare provider. I'm going to give a third disclosure that's not on the slide here. Just a short while ago, I did the TAP HD study up on the 4th floor where they did a blood draw. So if I get a little lightheaded or woozy up here, that's why. So I've been at Unicure for a little bit over 7 years now, and this is actually my 7th HDSA annual convention, which is pretty hard to believe. My first one was the one in Schaumburg, Illinois, in 2017. Was anybody there? All right, so there were some folks who were there. Excellent. Do you remember that Alice Cooper was staying there? Yeah, he was there. You'd see him outside walking his little white dog. It was really funny to see like this, goth Alice Cooper with this tiny little white dog walking around outside. I found that very entertaining. I also remember at the clinical trial showcase, there was only one industry trial represented that year. So we've certainly come a long way since then, in no small part thanks to all of you and your efforts and participation, and thank you to wonderful organizations like the HDSA. Okay, so who is Unicure? Well, at Unicure, we consider ourselves to be pioneers in the field of gene therapy, in developing gene therapies for rare genetic diseases. So to be a pioneer, you need to blaze new paths. And we've done that through the years. In 2012, we got approval for the first gene therapy ever in Europe, a product that was called Glybera. Just this past November, the gene therapy that we developed for hemophilia B, the first of its kind, was approved in the US and in Europe. Most importantly for everyone here, in 2020, we initiated the first gene therapy clinical trial ever for HD. Unicure operates out of 3 locations: Amsterdam, Lexington, Massachusetts, where I am based, and Basel, Switzerland. The company originally was called Amsterdam Molecular Therapeutics with the acronym AMT in the Netherlands. So I'm mentioning that because I'm going to refer back to AMT a little bit later in the presentation, so you have that background. So what exactly is gene therapy? So to put it very simply, gene therapy is a method of using genetic material to treat or prevent disease. Gene therapies have been in development for literally decades. And over the past few years, we're finally starting to see the fruits of all that labor, with a number of gene therapies being approved for serious genetic disorders, including spinal muscular atrophy, which was mentioned in one of the earlier presentations this morning, also an inherited form of blindness, in the gene therapy for hemophilia B that I just mentioned. For HD, the type of gene therapy being tested is called gene regulation. It is designed to reduce the production of the Huntington protein. Buildup of the mutant Huntington protein is thought to cause the symptoms of HD. Our investigational therapy is called AMT-130. So there's the AMT that I referenced before. So all of Unicure's development programs, going back to the beginning of the company, have the prefix of AMT. So AMT-130 targets messenger RNA, which plays a role in how proteins get made. The gene therapy allows cells to produce blocking messenger RNA, non-selectively preventing the production of the Huntington protein. So non-selectively means that it doesn't discriminate between the wild-type protein and the mutant protein. So how do we get AMT-130 where it needs to go? During a single surgery, AMT-130 is administered under general anesthesia by a skilled surgeon using real-time MRI guidance. So MRI is magnetic resonance imaging, into the caudate nucleus and putamen of the brain. Those together are known as the striatum. So these are the areas that are most affected by HD. AMT-130 delivers instructions to make blocking messenger RNA that interferes with HD messenger RNA, preventing the production of the Huntington protein. AMT-130 is designed to stay in the brain cells, and continue to make blocking messenger RNA, preventing the production of the Huntington protein over time. It is important to note that the gene does not integrate into the DNA, but rather forms what's called an episome. So I'm the advocacy guy, not the medical guy or the science guy. So if you want to understand more about how that works, I have some medical colleagues over here, and you'd be welcome to approach them afterwards and chat with them, or you can come to our booth in the exhibit hall this afternoon and chat with them. So what are the goals of gene therapy for HD? So by definition, goals are aspirational. The following is what we hope to do with AMT-130, but we have to show that we can do this safely and effectively in our clinical trials. So we hope to reduce the production of the mutant Huntington protein throughout the brain. We want to preserve the function of brain cells. We want to delay or prevent the progression of the symptoms of HD. We want to establish long-term, multi-year benefit from a one-time procedure. And importantly, we want to maintain patients' quality of life. Now let's take a look at the clinical trials that are currently in progress. There are two trials that are active called the HD Gentrix 1, which is the US trial, and HD Gentrix 2, which is the trial that's happening in the European Union. In both trials, there are a low dose and a high dose cohort. So cohort simply means group. We start with a lower dose because these early trials are primarily to assess safety. Once the safety of the lower dose has been established and confirmed by independent experts, the trial moves to the higher dose group. Some patients in the US trial went through what's called an imitation surgery in order to compare them to people who got the study drug. In addition, the trial is blinded, meaning neither the patient nor the doctors or the company know who gets the study drug and who gets the imitation surgery. After 1 year, the patients are unblinded and know if they got the study drug or not. They can then decide if they want to cross over and receive the study drug if they're still eligible according to all the criteria, which I'm going to show in the next slide. The US trial will have a third group enrolling in the second half of this year. The first two groups that I had mentioned before are complete, so the enrollment is done for those two groups. So it's because of this third group that we're here presenting at the Clinical Trial Showcase today. So I just want to kind of explain the nuance of that a little bit. So a trial is active and running, but it doesn't necessarily mean that at this exact moment that if you went to a site, they would be enrolling patients. So I just want to be really clear about that so there's no confusion. But again, hopefully fairly soon, the third cohort will be up and running and enrolling, and we'll be announcing when that happens. Okay, so here's a look at the trial design and the eligibility requirements. These criteria determine who is eligible to be considered for the trial. Even if you meet all of these criteria on paper, it's really important to explain that you still need to be assessed by the site to enter the trial. So I'm not going to go into the detail of every single what they call inclusion and exclusion criteria because it's quite long, but I'd like to just kind of hit on the very significant ones just to give you that high-level understanding of who would be eligible for the trial. So firstly, a clinical diagnosis of early manifest HD. A genotype of 40 CAG repeats or greater, between the ages of 25 to 65 years old, people with a previous exposure to gene therapy, Huntington lowering strategies, or experimental brain surgery, unfortunately, would not be eligible. And one very important criterion that I'd like to mention is striatal volume. So I mentioned before that the striatum is the part of the brain that is most affected by HD. So that area needs to be of an adequate size to safely receive the gene therapy. So that would be assessed when somebody went in to be screened. If somebody were interested in participating, they'd first need to do a screening visit to see if they qualify. And then if they qualified, they would then do a baseline visit to gather data and information to measure against later. They would then go through the surgery. Participants would then be followed up for every 3 months through year 2 and every 6 months through years 3 to 5. During these visits, the various biomarkers and endpoints would be measured and assessed to see the impact of AMT-130. So what's next for our HD clinical program? As I mentioned before, we initiated the HD GeneTrix-1 trial back in 2020, which means that the patients, so the last patients in the highest dose cohort, so kind of like the last patients that were treated, they're out 2 years now. So our plan is to provide an interim look at what we're seeing in the trial before the end of this month. So it's actually coming up very soon. The update is expected to include safety and tolerability, biomarker, imaging, and functional data across both high and low dose cohorts. I'm happy to say that we'll be partnering with the HDSA to help get that information out to the community via written communications. And we're also hoping and planning to do a webinar together with the HDSA. As I mentioned before, a third group of patients is expected to begin enrollment in the US in the second half of 2023. As for the crossovers, we're hoping to complete all of those imminently. Patient enrollment in the higher dose cohort of the HD GeneTrix-2 trial, the EU trial, is expected to be completed soon, with 1 year of clinical data from the lower dose cohort expected in the second half of 2023. And what about after that? So if a company is successful in showing that a study drug is safe and shows promising signs of efficacy in a phase 1/2 trial, normally the FDA then requires the company to do a final phase 3 trial. So this is called a pivotal trial because it's the trial that the FDA will base their approval on. A phase 3 is normally larger in terms of the number of participants and the number of clinical sites. So again, that's the normal progression, but it's impossible to predict how things will go. What's most important is to make sure that we execute the best clinical trial possible with the current trials that we are running at the moment. And we couldn't execute the best possible trials without your help, support, and involvement. So over the course of this program, we've had multiple patient and caregiver advisory boards that have provided us invaluable insights. The most recent one was an HD COPE advisory board that we did just this past December at our office in Lexington. We have had patient speakers come into the company to educate and inspire our employees. We've attended countless conference, education days. So the collaboration with HDSA, the collaboration with patient organizations, the collaboration with the community has been absolutely critical in this program for many years, and we deeply, deeply appreciate that. So for more information, so most importantly, talk to your doctor, talk to your nurse, talk to members of your care team. That's always the best place to start. Since you're here, you already know that patient organizations like the HDSA offer amazing resources and education. If you'd like to learn more about where the clinical trial sites are located, please go to HDSA's trialfinder.org, which was presented earlier. You can also go to clinicaltrials.gov, which was also mentioned earlier. And there's an email address in the slide that you can always get in touch with us if you would like to. And if you don't have time to jot that down, again, you can visit us at the booth and we'd be happy to write that down for you. And as I mentioned before, at the booth we'll have our medical colleagues there, and so if you have any of the hard questions, I'll punt it over to them. Finally, we'd like to thank the entire team who has worked with us to make this study a possibility. In addition to the committee members listed on the slide, there are also all of the investigators and staff at all of the clinical sites. Most importantly, we'd like to thank all of the patients who have volunteered for the clinical trial and in their families. The patients who volunteer to be part of this trial are brave beyond words that I can describe. They're going into the unknown with no promise to themselves, but often with a desire to provide hope to others, and we humbly thank you. And I think that's my last slide. And we may have time for a question or two, Leora? Yeah? Okay, my greatest fear was a really, really difficult question, so I think you're working with me here, I think. Thank you for that.
I'm happy to ask.
Oh, boy. Thought I was home free.
You're not getting off the hook. I'm curious what you would say has been the biggest challenge of these trials.
Oh, wow. That's such an interesting question, and there's probably so many ways that I could answer that. What is the biggest challenge? Well, it's one thing to ask me and another thing to ask my clinical colleagues who are actually, doing the operations of the trial, and I'm sure that, their answer might be very different. But I would say that one of the challenges is the time that it takes. So it's a really slow trial for a lot of different reasons, and one of the reasons is for safety. So the very first patients that participated in the trial, it was, and I'm not going to remember this exactly, but it was like you would treat one patient, and then you would have to wait 3 months, and then there would be a data safety monitoring board that would look at the results and look at the safety, and then they would give the go-ahead. And then you would treat one more patient, and you'd have to wait another 3 months. And then the pace starts to pick up after that, but it's a slow roll. And it's also difficult in that regard because in some ways, HD is a slowly progressing disease, and so you need to observe people over a long period of time, which is very challenging. Yeah, so it's a long trial.
Well, thank you so much, Dan, and let's thank all of our speakers again. And thanks to all of you for attending this year's Clinical Trials Showcase. We have another session starting at 1:30. All across the hotel, and continue to enjoy convention.